Okay, everyone, we will call to order. Okay, everyone, we're ready to start. We're going to call to order our regular meeting of council. And before we start today, I just want to acknowledge a loss that we've had in our community. So on behalf of council, I'd like to offer our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Donna Brett. Donna was a pillar of our community and dedicated herself to its betterment through her involvement in various committees and boards throughout her many years of public service. Some of those boards include School District 70, North Island College, and as chair of the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District. Donna's 9 years of service as a city councillor brought with it many accomplishments. Her passion was notably reflected in her support of fire and police services and her involvement in the building of the new RCMP detachment. In 2004, Donna was the recipient of the Freedom of the Municipality, the highest honor the City of Port Alberni can bestow upon an individual to recognize their distinguished service. On a personal note, Donna was somebody who I appreciated very much, and I remember several difficult times in my time as mayor where Donna would reach out with a phone call. I remember one time she mailed me this really lovely card, just to say she was thinking of me or, just recognize the work we were doing in the community. And that just is the type of person that Donna was, always thinking of other people. Donna will be sorely missed by all who knew her, and we thank Donna's family for sharing her with us, and we keep them in our thoughts as they mourn her loss. Thank you. And we'll just have a moment of silence for Donna. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we'll start our meeting today by recognizing that we're gathering on the unceded traditional territories of the Huipachesset and Sechot First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add from council? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to write a letter of support to Western Forest Products for the continued operations of APD.
Thank you very much. We will add that under new business. So item 4 under new business. Any other items of new business? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of notices of motion towards the end of the agenda, please.
Thank you. We'll just note item 5, Councillor Douglas notices. Any other items to add to the agenda? Seeing none. Any items from the corporate officer? None. Then would somebody like to make a motion to approve our agenda as amended?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we have the minutes from the special meeting held on January 23rd, 2023 at 9:30 a.m., from the special meetings held February 6th and 7th, 2023 at 8:15 a.m., and the regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on January 23rd, January 23rd, 2023, as presented. Would somebody like to move adoption of our minutes?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. This takes us to public input period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council, and we'll take a maximum of 4 speakers for up to 3 minutes each. Would anyone like to speak today? I'll recognize first Major Ramsey, and then we'll take Ellen Frood. Okay, thanks. And sorry, if you don't mind just introducing your name and address to begin.
Major Michael Ramsey, home address I think is on Virginia somewhere, work address is across the street. All right. City Council, I have a lot of respect for you members of council, and it's only after much thought and many conversations that I felt compelled to write this letter that I'm reading. After I stood before council on the 23rd of January, a number of members of our community have approached me concerned that I was bullied, particularly by Councillor Patola. Some people reached out to me even in person, checking on my well-being. Perhaps council is unaware that appearing before council, whose members are sitting behind your desks in front of an audience, and having the encounter broadcast on television and social media in and of itself can be very intimidating. On the 23rd of January, prior to even the meeting commencing, a community leader who was presenting to council mentioned to me how nervous she was. I was more than a little concerned, even sitting as a member in the gallery, by the way in which Councillor Patola spoke to the city staff. It seemed like an interrogation. The matter was in front of council for up to 30 minutes, and during that time, Councillor Patola asked the same question repeatedly, even though the answers did not change, and even though it was obvious that people in the room were growing quite uncomfortable. It has been mentioned to me after this that his comments seemed provocative and certainly misleading. People interpreted Councillor Patola's comments as suggesting that the Salvation Army was requesting something illegal or unusual of City Council, which he knows or should know we were not. My concern in this is twofold. One, I do feel bad for city staff who have to appear before council on a regular basis. Being grilled publicly in this manner cannot be conducive to a good work environment. And two, I'm really concerned for citizens of our city who have matters that need to come before council. Appearing before council can be quite intimidating, and I can only imagine the fear and horror of any who are watching that meeting in preparation for their own appearance before council. City Council needs to be a safe place, and on the 23rd of January, in the eyes of many members of the public who approached me, it was not. I would really like some assurance made to the public that council will be a safe place for members of the public to appear, and that should a councillor appear to be bullying a member of the public in the future, that other members of council will please step in to protect the citizens of this city. In considering whether or not to bring this matter to the attention of council, because like I said, this can be quite intimidating standing here on any matter, I was reminded of a quote often attributed to Edmund Burke that I will paraphrase here. The only thing necessary for the triumph of bad behavior is for good people to do nothing. So then I really humbly submit all of this to all of you very good people for your consideration, sincerely and with much respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Major Ramsey, we don't normally have back and forth at this part of the agenda, but I do just want to recognize your comments around this needing to feel like an atmosphere that is comfortable for people. And I remember the first time I ever came to a council meeting, how intimidating it was, not knowing necessarily even, you know, if you're not used to being in this building, where to come in, which door to go through, at what point in the meeting you get to stand up and speak, for how long. If you don't know our processes, it's very intimidating as it is. So really take your comments and appreciate them being brought forward. This does need to be an atmosphere where everybody can feel comfortable coming forward and speaking. Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I recognize as well that this is not the usual place for a back and forth. So, Madam Mayor, as Chair, if you will permit me a few comments in response.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, I also agree that this should be a place of safety for all people in the community, as should our entire community should be a place of safety. And in this building, at this meeting, we protect the entire community by seeing that the right decisions are made, by the right process being followed, and by everyone's rights being respected. Madam Mayor, I do not intend to revisit the issue concerning the use of the Eagles Hall. That issue has been voted on and passed. Council speaks with one voice. Let me begin by expressing my sincerest apology to Michael Ramsey for his feelings of harassment and bullying as a result of my questions to him at the previous council meeting. Although I do note in his letter, he states he did not feel harassed or bullied, but other people told him he was. So, lest anyone skips ahead to my further comments and forgets the purposes of my words, I repeat, I apologize to Michael Ramsey for his feelings of harassment and bullying, and I extend this apology to staff, particularly Ms. Wade, and any other individuals who may have felt similar to the emotions expressed by Michael Ramsey. That should be the end of it, except that it may seem that the letter written and read by Michael Ramsey carries some comments that might be seen as criticism of my position with respect to housing in Port Alberni. I will address those assumptions so that we as a council and city may move forward without carrying this particular millstone tied to our necks. There is very little of lasting positive impact that anyone can achieve in this world. In my opinion, the best we can do is to try to make every person whom we interact with have a better day and not a worse one. We can rarely make someone's life better. That's something each individual chooses to pursue on their own. But we can offer rays of sunshine to encourage each other. We can discuss options and opinions, but beyond that, we simply cannot force one another to have different opinions or undertake different actions. The proposition put before council and approved at the previous meeting clearly had a purpose of offering some individuals a ray of sunshine, an objective which I fully support. Safe, acceptable housing or shelter in lieu thereof is something that I support wholeheartedly. Again, I shall repeat that. I am wholeheartedly in support of accessible housing and or shelter for all members of our community. This is not a position that needs to be proven, yet should there be any doubt, I would refer to the time and finances that I have donated to both the Bread of Life and the Salvation Army, amongst many other charitable organizations, both in our community, province, country, and world. All of which is anonymous, and none of which is offered as justification. Only confirmation that treating all people fairly and equally is central to my goals in this terrestrial life. I promised the electors of Port Alberni that I would be firm but nice. Perhaps I can adjust the tones of my comments toward the level of nice. However, I will not sacrifice the levels of firm. For better, but more often worse, this is an adversarial venue. That doesn't mean yelling, shouting, or otherwise disrespecting people, but it does mean exhibiting the strengths of your convictions and not collapsing like a house of cards at the first sign of resistance. I did not step forward to be a counselor with the objective of ruining anyone's day. I don't want to prove any point or put anyone in their place. However, it is entirely possible that my questions, observations, or proposals may cause someone else some difficulty. I realize that, and I accept that as an unintended consequence of this adversarial process. There is no offense intended. Michael Ramsey provided counsel with a quote from Sir Edmund Burke. Correctly stated, it is the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. This quote is not an accusation or a finger pointing at a particular person, but it is a general warning against all evil, and it applies to every person in our community. We all must be vigilant in recognizing wherever evil may come from. Incidentally, Edmund Burke left us with many quotable thoughts. Here's one that I think is particularly apropos for the workings of government. He that struggles with us strengthens our nerves and sharpens our skill. Our antagonist is our helper. So back to that ray of sunshine contained within the proposal to provide shelter beds in our community. Again, an objective I support. An objective that I deeply desire to see succeed. An objective that is much more valuable than to have it stained by a proceeding with an improper approach. My question to Michael Ramsey was, given that the individuals were currently sheltered at the Bread of Life, what made this issue so urgent that council was asked to disregard the law? There was no question of the value of the shelter, only why it was necessary to achieve this through a flawed approach. And it remains my opinion that this is a flawed approach. I am not a lawyer for this council. I am not offering any legal advice. But I can tell you that with a modicum of research on the internet, my opinion was reinforced. I am told that the city has a legal opinion suggesting that Section 270 of the Community Charter provides authority for the city to disregard its own laws. I have not seen this legal opinion. I've asked for this legal opinion. However, there is a procedure within the city that councillors are not allowed to view documents individually, lest one councillor has more information than another. So I would request at this time that that legal opinion be provided to all of councillors forthwith, and in any event, by the end of this week. Reading that legal opinion may answer my concerns, and I would be more than happy to follow the professional advice of greater minds than mine. As an aside, I would also request a copy of the Good Neighbor Agreement that was a pre-requirement to the temporary use permit for the Bread of Life. Yet another document that cannot be shown to only one councillor at a time. However, until I see this legal opinion, I remain in the position of believing that this action is against the law. Section 137 of the Community Charter specifically provides that a bylaw cannot be amended except by another bylaw. It would seem the purpose of this is to ensure that a bylaw isn't changed for the benefit of any party without the opportunity for all parties to be heard at a public hearing. Equal opportunity to contribute is foundational to democracy. By specifically disregarding the bylaws with regards to a specific property without a public hearing, the community around that property is being denied access to its democratic process. That is a process that is protected by the Community Charter, Local Government Act, and other legislation that gives a municipality its authority. Except for legislation, a municipality has no power. And where that power is specifically limited, a municipality can't try to enter through the back door where the front door is clearly locked. To do so would be acting for an improper purpose. I easily found the case of Reimer versus North Cowichan, 2018, where the court clearly states, a municipality cannot adopt a general policy not to enforce its bylaws. So, in conclusion, Madam Mayor, I apologize for offending Michael Ramsey and everyone else who shared his emotions. I am opposed to breaking the law or any actions that undermine the validity of council's actions. I do support housing and shelter, but housing and shelter that conforms to law, respects the concerns of all the community, and is built to withstand every challenge in any respect. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Patola, for your comments and for offering that apology. As a matter of process, I do just want to state that I declared a conflict of interest on the issue at the meeting when this came up. I no longer have that conflict of interest as my husband no longer works for the Salvation Army. So I just wanted to make that clear as I did sit through that, which was partly conduct related and partly issue related. So. And noted that there was some information in there that you would like to request, and if you'd like to bring that forward under new business as a motion or notice of motion, you're welcome to do that. Okay. Apologies, everyone, for taking us a bit off track in public input period. Ellen Frood, you're up next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Frood. I'm the Executive Director of Sage Haven Society, 3082 3rd Avenue. And it's my first time back to council in a long time. I'm glad to be here. So I want to just start by offering a personal comment. And that personal comment is one in support of Michael Ramsey. And I am somebody who reached out to him the next day and said, Michael, I've never seen you so angry. And I have never been so ashamed to see how he was grilled and that. Regardless of law, and everything else that comes with it, and the comment that we just heard, which was like a justification, the act was bullying and harassment. I work in a sector where we see that on a daily basis, and we see how the lives of people are affected, the post-traumatic stress and all of those things. So that is my personal comment in support of Michael's letter. So I am here today. I have this lovely coldest night of the year bag, which is filled with coldest night of the year hats. Yes. And in the past, I have given hats to each member of council in the hope that they will enter a team and participate in coldest night of the year. So this year's event is taking place on the 25th of February, leaving by our office in the Uptown area. And it's a 2 and a 5K walk, and it's cnoy.org. Sherry knows, she's done it before. Really easy to register a team, and we'd love to see you out there. So I am giving you the ceremonial hats in the hope that I might somehow encourage you to participate and come out for the fun. Thanks. Yep. If somebody wants to make an outrageous offer, I might be convinced to part ways with that lovely case. Oh, no. Oh. Good thing I don't have a hat for me. Oh, no. Okay. Can you do this?
All right, is everybody ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, say canoe? Nice.
I'm gonna grab one too. Don't move, Councillor Douglas. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Swag. Nice hat.
Okay, thank you. And then we had a speaker in the front row, if you'd like to come forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Council, thank you so much. My name is Nina Nguyen. This is my first time speaking in this sort of environment, so please excuse my shaky voice. I bought my first home here in Port Alberni, April 2021 on Dunbar Street, and began serving community as a home and community care nurse. The 2 lots that I purchased back up onto Dry Creek Greenbelt and is a couple hundred meters from this Friendship Center on 3rd. And over the past 2 years, myself and my neighbors have been victim of numerous thefts, vandalism, arson, trespassing, littering, and squatters living on our property. All of these circumstances have been described in detail when I submitted a letter to the council and a permit variance application on the 9th of February for section 6.7.3. The majority of homes in Port Alberni have fences higher than this bylaw specifically states, and the homeowners have taken their food security and safety into their own hands, as they should. And these undisturbed hedges tower anywhere between 8 and 20 feet. So the selective enforcement of this bylaw, I feel, is kind of unethical for in this specific circumstances. It directly penalizes some of the most vulnerable persons, as myself, who live with disabilities and are victim of regular crime and abundant wildlife coming in and out of the property. And so by being singled out and potentially fined thousands of dollars for building a fence that is no higher than the fences and hedges of the majority of individuals in Port Alberni. Those homeowners with hedge heights greater than 4 feet have freely enjoyed the benefits of food security and safety without harassment, interruption, or enforcement of bylaw 6.7.3. So, for example, my neighbor, Angel, who lives at 4798 Dunbar Street, is the living caregiver for her 94-year-old grandmother who lives with Alzheimer's disease. Angel has equipped her house with numerous security cameras and has a sledgehammer behind her grandmother's rocking chair. She fears for her safety and experiences crime regularly. So would the city deny Angel her opportunity to secure her land and protect her loved ones while the majority of homeowners in the area live without this selective enforcement of this bylaw? So given the inconsistencies in hedge height and fence height throughout Port Alberni and within the Dunbar neighborhood, it is inappropriate that those who have been most affected by crime in the area are being penalized for building fences to protect themselves. The residents of Dunbar have shown considerable support for my fence and its construction, and the majority are underneath the same belief that they too would benefit from higher fences due to the rise of crime and pervasive animals and wildlife in the area. So I hope that council will consider these unique circumstances and support property owners who are living within these high-risk areas. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. I think there was a hand at the back for our last speaker today. Yes, right at the back. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Karen Brown, and this is the first time I've ever stood up in front of anybody. And with grace and gratitude, I'd like to ask Madam Mayor and the council what the input of a smart city would mean to Port Alberni.
Thank you. I just want to first comment, I've received an overwhelming amount of emails and questions about smart cities and 15-minute cities. We are not a part of, formally a part of either of these initiatives. So there was a grant that was made in 2018, before I was mayor, to apply for some funding to become a zero-waste city. There was an opportunity at the time. We were not successful in that grant. The initiative did not proceed from there. We are not a 15-minute city, and I know there's a lot of misinformation about 15-minute cities as well. We are certainly a city that values walkability and all of the good city planning concepts that I think go alongside that concept, but we're certainly not in the process of implementing anything like that.
Okay, that's
Anything
all.
in line with those specific programs
Great.
anyways.
And thank you.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, so that concludes public input period for today. We'll move on to delegations, and we have one delegation today from the West Coast Native Healthcare Society, Rainbow Gardens. Come on forward, Derek.
Good day, everybody. I've brought with me today, first of all, when we received the notice to come and talk here, if you scroll back a little bit there and went up, you can see that on the list of people I brought with me the building committee. Maybe I'll introduce them. Try to talk into the mic while I do it. Judy Joseph, and Dariush is our architect, and Lil Thomas, our business manager. And then on this side, Art Van Volsen, he's the new building manager, and Bev Denning. And at the very back there, John Jessup, project manager. So really, I guess the reason we're here, as I look further down on your agenda, is to discuss our park plans, or where we're going to be going with our park. Is that kind of why we're here?
Yeah, I think Councillor Solda originally made the motion to invite Rainbow Gardens because we have been getting pretty regular questions about the status of your park project. Alongside that, two actions from the city, I think, have compounded that. So a couple years ago, we removed the park because of condition across the street on River Road. So that kind of, added to the issue, as there was 3 parks in the neighborhood, and then there was 2, and then there were
And
1, and then now,
there's
of course, we've removed the other park.
Right.
So the questions, I think, while they may be focused at Rainbow Gardens or around Rainbow Gardens, are kind of a cumulative issue of those
Right.
actions with the city as well.
Well, I did write you a letter and tried to explain, give you a little history on us. We're here to answer any questions you have of us, so fire away, I guess.
Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. So nice to see you, Derek, and congratulations on the success of your buildings that you've been doing in Westport Place. But I think a lot of the concern is, if I remember correctly, when you first started your first building, the park was removed with the promise that it was going to be replaced at a later date. So do I remember that correctly? And if I did, what is the status of that?
Yes, you're pretty much. In 2006, there was a public hearing, and at that time, we did provide drawings, and we showed that there'd be 2 buildings on that lot 2 that you're talking about. And we've built one. We haven't built the second one yet, and we're still planning to. We're still hoping to, and we're hoping to get on to that fairly quickly here, as you can read in my letter. The amenities in the park that go with that would come after that fact. So there are still plans to build gathering space there. There's still plans. We now have 102 residents there that still want outdoor space. We still plan to build that stuff. It's just in the final phase is when it'll get built.
Can you maybe just elaborate on what your amenities are going to be after your next phase? And approximately, do you have a timeline for that as well?
You want to speak to that? Well, sure. I'll let John speak to that.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
John Jessup, thank you, Your Worship. As in many projects, the very last thing that we do is landscaping, because the building is finished and all the civil work that goes underground, water mains, storm and sanitary sewers, are completed. And then we know roughly what areas we have and how they'll relate to the buildings in terms of landscaping. And I'd also say that our funding for these projects is from BC Housing and CMHC, and probably the last thing they provide us with is sufficient funding to do the landscaping, and usually in and around the buildings that they've funded, and for the residents that live therein. So I think Derek was quite right to say there is a remaining portion of Lot 2 that could be used for additional housing, as well as, in the final instance, some amenities. And I think our priority is naturally towards amenities that serve the seniors' residents at Rainbow Gardens. And that's where it will go. I think we offered as a suggested compromise at the public hearing that if it was really a concern for council, that we would offer this to make it an intergenerational park with seniors and families with kids. But our priority was definitely for the seniors' residents, and also I do recall that the director of planning at that time, Mr. Scott Smith, not a passive-aggressive planner, made it very explicit in his council report at the rezoning that there was no legally binding or no certainty that the park arrangement proposed in the concept plan would actually be developed, and that if council and staff and the community wanted to have input to that, staff should be instructed to provide a binding agreement to that effect. And as I recall, council declined to do that. So we believe it's up to our purpose primarily to build park and open space there. And depending on where we are with any funding left over, we'll consider our commitment to have families and children there in some kind of a playground. But you know, the problem with us as a nonprofit, and even with the city, is coming up with funds to actually build parks and playgrounds and build play equipment and you know, sports amenities. So that's why we're a little hamstruck with this, because our funding basically is for the housing, and even landscaping is considered a sort of last priority. But anyway, I hope that kind of summarizes where we're at with this.
Thank you, Bev. Did you want to add to that?
Okay, Bev.
No, there's something I just would really much like to add, and that's as a member, as a part of the board of directors of the West Coast Native Healthcare Society, I want you all to be aware of our accomplishments. We are just in the process of renting out 48 units to low-income seniors. Those people moved in last month, they're moving in this month. They are people coming, seniors, 55 plus, coming from the most squalid rooming houses, living in trailers, motorhomes full of black mold. They're moving into brand-new apartments. We have provided that. You talked earlier about shelter and housing. We're doing it. Councillor Patola, you talked about making lasting differences. We are making lasting differences, and I think that should be acknowledged. And we want to maximize the land that we have and make as many rental units available as we possibly can do. That is our paramount goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. And I was going to actually ask how many units total you have now, and I think if I'm reading...
plus 20
That's
plus
right.
the long-term care facility.
That's right. And how many in the long-term care facility? It's 102 total.
And 10 assisted living.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think that is critically important to recognize the good work that's being done. And I know I previously sat on the Rainbow Gardens board as a liaison and always appreciated the effort to provide housing.
And I would like to remind council too that when we go back in history and we talked about before the land was rezoned, there were talks with the city about land that's on the other side of Russell Street, and there's lots of potential. You got lots of land around there that you could move the park to.
Thank you. And so that was going to be my comment. I think that there is a balance of needs here, and housing is a critical need in our community. And we also need to make sure that we're not overlooking the need for green space, open space, park space for children, and park space for seniors as well. When this issue did come before council 2 councils ago or 3 councils ago or something, it was discussed that there was an alternative location where the city could build the park, and that was on Russell Street, and at the time that wasn't an option that Westport neighbors supported. But I do think that given the changes in the neighborhood with the River Road Park being removed, with the second smaller Westport Park being removed, and with Rainbow Gardens developing more housing than originally we thought would be reasonable in this amount of, or not reasonable, but we thought would be possible in this amount of time. I think it is worth a relook from council, and I do note that we just heard some great news from the province a few days ago about $1 billion coming to municipalities for infrastructure, and I did ask our MLA when she called with the news about types of infrastructure that this could be used for, and that money is, to be determined amount. We know it will be significant, but we'll hear in March. And I think that there is a timely opportunity to relook at the Westport Park situation and determine where it is best suited. I want Rainbow Gardens to be supported in every way to continue building housing for people in our community who absolutely need that housing. And it doesn't have to come at the cost of not having park space in that area. So I think there's a happy medium here, a path forward, and I want to avoid this being a Rainbow Gardens versus the Westport neighborhood discussion, because it really shouldn't be. There's good work being done by Rainbow Gardens, and the people of Westport should have park space as they used to. So I would like to ask staff for an initial report on where staff feels park space would be best suited in the neighborhood and what that could potentially look like. I'll make that a motion if someone would like to second it.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mealy. And from there, I think, we don't need a full budget initially, but I think just a kind of a starting point of looking at that conversation and bringing it back for council to have something to discuss. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When you said that funds are short, and I absolutely understand that, and I do appreciate, as I said in my earlier comments, I really appreciate all the good work that you do. But there is grants available for playgrounds. I belong to Cherry Creek Recreation Commission, and we got a grant to do a new playground on Moore Road next to Cherry Creek Hall, and it's a beautiful park. And we did, it was done with a lot of volunteer work as well. I mean, I'm not very good with the shovel, but I'm sure you get a lot of people that would be happy to come out and help. So I would encourage you to try and make the effort to look for those opportunities as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd certainly like to get a link to that funding possibility, because that's really what we're in the business of doing, to try and troll for funding wherever it might be available for housing and housing relative to open space, park and playgrounds. It's always been a good linkage. I'm just going to say one more thing because I told everyone we should be brief, and here I'm the one running on at the mouth. I asked Rainbow Gardens staff before we came here to give me an estimate of the breakdown in their staff and the breakdown in their residents between First Nations, Indigenous people, and non-Indigenous people, because I think there's the impression that Rainbow Gardens serves primarily First Nations and Indigenous peoples. But for one reason or another, when you look at it, out of 65 staff that work at Rainbow Gardens in care, assisted living, and housing, 21 are First Nations people, and that's about 32%. So, 68%, almost 70% of the staff that work there are non-Indigenous people. And looking now at the residents, considering the rent up that's now complete at RG 48, we call it, the Hoopsatos apartments, there's a total of 112 residents in care, assisted living, and housing on the Rainbow Gardens campus. And that's not 100%, but it's who's in place now. And of the 112 residents, 38 are First Nations or Indigenous peoples. So that's only 34%. So between 65 and 70% of the residents in care, assisted living, or housing at Rainbow Gardens are non-Indigenous people. So in the day of reconciliation and accord between our peoples, I think this is a great demonstration of how we have a truly diverse population there. And I know a lot of people think, well, it's only for First Nations, Indigenous people, but it's the record. Let the record show it's not. So thanks very much.
Thank you, John, and thanks for all the work again that Rainbow Gardens is doing. I would just say that even if it was 100% for Indigenous people of the community, if that was recognized as the highest need, that you would have the same support from our council. But it is wonderful to hear how many Indigenous employees you do have. I know that we've talked at the city quite frequently about working toward our workforce looking more like our community, and we know that we have some big steps to take there. So Rainbow Gardens is an example of good work being done there. Thank you. Did you have
Thanks.
closing comments, Derek?
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Good to see you.
Thank you. Okay, and any final comments from council? Seeing none? Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. Item number 1, the 5-year, did we vote on the motion that I made? My apologies. So the motion was to direct staff to prepare a report looking at preliminary options on where a park would be best suited. And Councillor Haggard noting that you did mention that there's grant funds available. My thought there was the Westport lands may or may not be the Rainbow Gardens lands may or may not actually be the best location for a park. So I think this will just be an initial kind of report to look at where it makes most sense, and we can continue conversations from there, either as a city or with Rainbow Gardens or both. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And now we will move on to 5-year financial plan Q&A summary. Andrew, I don't know if you probably don't want to go over, but if you want to just introduce kind of what the document is for the public's awareness, so that they know how we're tracking, I think that would be great.
Yeah, certainly, Madam Mayor. So annually what we do is we provide this tracking document to council and the public just to keep track of all the questions and then the responses from staff, because obviously we can't answer on the spot often with some questions that come up, but we do our best, and we might need to fulfill a little bit more of the detail behind those questions. So we do have this Q&A here. We do allow council the opportunity to pull anything out and have any further discussion. But with that, this will be brought back every single meeting until we adopt the financial plan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Andrew, for this. So just going, first of all, I have not talked to Councillor Solda I've been flying by the seat of my pants, but she did ask some questions last meeting that I did agree with, and talking about the contingency. So number 10 is how much has the contingency been used in the last 5 years? So 200,000, and then 2018, then very small amounts for 2019, 2020, 2021. I would assume that's because COVID. We're back to 200,000. So I would say that 100,000 this coming year with interest rates rising would not be enough, and that I would like to see 200,000 at least. Again, it was coming from Councillor Solda's questions, and she's not here, so I just thought I'd bring that up.
Thank you very much. Andrew, did you have any comment on that, or how the rationale for that decision to change it to 100,000 was made?
Madam Mayor, what we were doing through the budgeting process before we brought it to council was just looking at opportunities to bring down the percentage, and that was one of the items that staff has brought forward. Of course, council, if you feel we need to populate it with additional funds, we can do that, and then we'll provide options to council to enable that to occur if that's the wish of council.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Just number 3, is that the referring to Upper Johnston Road, Walmart area? I know the merchants up there have been looking for decorative lighting. Or is it all of Johnston Quarter? No?
I think the intent from Councillor Solda was the Upper Johnston boulevards that have been talked about by a few businesses up there.
Okay, great. Just glad to see that there. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, seeing none. Andrew, would you mind speaking to best process for council to be aware of for if we would like to direct some changes, or if we would like to see how, you know, changing contingency from 100 to 200 impacts the budget, how looking at getting quotes for adding those lights on Upper Johnston, what's the best process for council to be aware of at this point?
Madam Mayor, I think that's a great question. I think what we would like council to do is just highlight any of these items, and if there is consensus among council to populate the financial plan with that, we can bring that back. What we do have is the opportunity at our next Committee of the Whole meeting is to provide some more detail on what that would mean as far as financial plan increases, or if we could use other items such as reserves or prior surplus to populate the financial plan with that. That will be provided to council in the staff report, just to provide the options and then have that discussion on how we'd like to see that populated in the financial plan.
Thank you. Any further comments at this point? Okay. I think those are 2 items that definitely we'd like to flag for consideration, and we can have that conversation more at the next Committee of the Whole.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the document, Andrew. We'll move on to item number 2, the Committee of the Whole meeting January 31st, 2023, zoning bylaw amendment. And this is just recommendation from Committee of the Whole for council to move forward. Does council have any questions? Councillor Mealy.
I'll make the motion if you like, Madam Mayor. That council directs staff to initiate community consultation on the proposed bylaw content changes to prior to City of Port Alberni zoning bylaw number 5074 2023 being considered by council as recommended by the Committee of the Whole January 31st, 2023.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? None opposed? Carried. And on to item F, staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Haggard.
I didn't know I was supposed to read this.
I'm assuming. It's on the desk.
I'd like to move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated February 13th, 2023 be received and checks numbered 152107 to 152284 inclusive and payment of accounts totaling $2,747,284.16 be approved.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Not seeing any comments or questions on the motion. All in favor? Carried, none opposed. Item number 2, capital infrastructure deficit. Tim.
Madam Mayor, thank you. There's a staff report in your agenda and on the screen. My recollection is that council asked for staff's input on budget needs or staff priorities, for lack of a better term. And so we've taken that to mean what are items that are not currently in the draft financial plan that council that staff want to bring to council's attention. And So the approach we've taken is very high level, as you will have seen, and it's broad brush, and there's almost certainly some, because we've rolled up basically itemized lists into some broad categories, there's, those broad categories cover a number of things, but there's almost certainly some things that we haven't pulled into this. And, but keeping in line with council's high-level perspective on these things, we didn't bring you itemized lists from staff, although I'm sure some staff members would like a chance to bring you into the challenges they face. That being said, let's walk through this report together. So the background of it is there's a 5-year financial plan that Mr. McGifford will walk you through shortly in this meeting, I believe. And some of the drivers of that are needs to fund a 5-year continuation of provision of services and renewal of infrastructure. Some of the factors, inflationary pressures, as the report says, running in the range of 6 to 8. We're not sure what, 6 to 8% per year. Not sure what the future years look like. We have finite resources in virtually every aspect of city operations. We've just been impacted by 2 collective agreements in fire services and policing, both of which have resulted in higher costs and some retroactive payment, which is impacting in 2023. We're returning to pre-COVID levels of service, and especially in Parks and Recreation, that is impactful where we had pulled down some budget lines in previous years. With those services back on, we're incurring those costs again. And the COVID bridging that the provincial government had provided has now timed out, and so we're back into funding, self-funding, really, these programs. So this is, we've used the term infrastructure deficit, so, and you know, please work with me on, that's a statement to capture a broad number of things. So in terms of the categories that we've rolled this up into, streets and drainage, one category. Council, some councillors who've been around for a while will recall that we are actually fairly well funded in sewer and water and garbage in terms of user fees that are in reserve funds that over the course of time fund the renewal of those infrastructure pieces. On sewer today, we're bottomed out because we just built a new sewer treatment facility. But over the coming years, that fund will rebuild. And that's how they're intended to work. They're working very well. Likewise, the city's fleet replacement costs, our equipment replacement reserve fund, working very well. Just recently, we're impacted by inflationary costs. And as Andrew will tell you, the fact that we pushed some purchases out from previous years into some that are landing in this year, and we no longer have enough money because we contributed to the replacement of those vehicles several years ago, and we haven't continued to add to those funds. So now we find ourselves a little underfunded for apparatus that we may have been funded for a few years ago. But that's just a consequence of making best use of equipment before we replace it. However, we fund our streets and our storm drainage capital work through a combination of taxes and funds from senior governments, whether they're grants or what used to be called gas tax funding. So those often are the limiting factors on a capital project. While we have funds for the water and the sewer work under the ground, we don't always have funds for the street and the paving and the subgrade prep work and the sidewalks and the landscaping and all those other things that are not part of any evergreen funding program. So in terms of what would it take to become evergreen funded, and this is a very round, broad brush number, $1 million a year would go a long way in every year to have, to be able to action the projects we want to action. And again, very, very high level, broad brush approach. In terms of facilities, this might not be as visible as street paving is, but we own a lot of facilities. And many of them were built in 1967, which I'm sad to say was more than 50 years ago. And even those facilities are showing fatigue and needs for replacement. Some of the buildings that were built more recently also need attention, if not replacement, and we own some that are older. And if you look through the list of facilities that we own and operate, there's a lot of them there. There's also a long list of facilities that we own that we don't operate, that other people operate. And the report includes the curling rink, the Industrial Heritage Center, CPR Roundhouse, Roland Arts Center, Abbey Field, Clutis Haven Marina, Hilton Center, Abbey Field, and a childcare facility on the former Cedarwood school property. And there are other facilities, you know, walking bridges and different things that are not adequately asset managed in terms of budgeting. And so there's a building deferred maintenance cost for those and other things that, because we're not putting money away today to maintain and replace them, at some point we'll be faced with the decision about, do we replace it or knock it down or divest. So I want to draw your attention to the City Works and Parks facility in particular. We are, staff wanted to put $800,000 into 2023's budget to replace a very tired boiler and a roof at that facility. And we don't know if we can get through another year with the boiler we have. We're hesitant to ask you to spend $800,000 on a building that we're telling you, a facility that we're telling you needs to be moved and replaced. And so that's an example of this deferred maintenance eventually going to catch up to us and be an emergency expenditure in a building that we don't want to be in long term. So that's that. From my personal perspective, that is our top priority today in facilities that need attention. And we don't have to tell you about the aquatic center. That as well needs to be replaced. Where are we there? One thing we might do, rather than dive in and start patching, is undertake a needs assessment. And our staff are actually pretty well positioned to tell us what the facilities need. And what we haven't really undertaken is looked at what facilities the city currently needs and is going to need over the next 5 to 20 years. And with that kind of, and the OCP might help us with that, right? So if the community is going to grow and it's going to change, where do we want to be even in 10 years? What facilities do we want to own and operate? What do we need to consider building new? What do we consider letting go of? And that would really inform our budget process. And again, in very broad stroke way, we're suggesting $500,000 in every year for facility maintenance and renewal would go a long way to maintaining the facilities we currently own. Going down, we've lumped in technology, delayed technological and process advancement, and that ranges anything from, on the technology side, our lack of a functioning GIS program, and that, as you're aware, that holds us back in a number of ways. We are working on identifying what our needs are and what a multi-step plan would be, and so we're working toward that. We'll be able to come back to you with funding for subsequent budget years on that piece. There's also some other aspects in terms of, just scroll down, Danielle, in terms of process, and I'm out of my depth on this, but our records management system is a couple iterations behind the current. So in some respects, we're still hard copy, managing data in a hard copy way, or in orphan or separate softwares where they're not easily accessed from, and GIS does that, right? It pulls it from different places. So we could do better in accessing data and information if we had a current information management system, document management system. And the website, as we know, is dated and it's not easy to pull information out of that. So it likely needs a rebuild. So in terms of budget, if we had $250,000 in our budget for this broad area every year, plus project funding as required, that would help us modernize and not fall further behind. Then lastly, enhanced services. Any city would regularly need to enhance the levels of service we provide and consider new services, and you're asked that all the time. And there is no room in this budget, as we discussed at our last meeting. There's no easy room in this budget to enhance services or to add a new service. And lastly, part of your role is to be strategic and to look forward and see what the community needs. And there's very limited ability for you to do that in the current budget. There's no funding attached to that. So in both of those categories, the needs would vary depending on the situation. And I hate to end on a gloomy note. Let's see if it gets any better. Yeah, let me just go back to say it's not all bad news. We do very well on asset managing in a number of areas, just not all the areas yet. And so when we talk about our or absence of an asset management plan. Yet we don't have one under one umbrella. We're not alone in that. Local governments, many are where we are, and when we get to there, we'll pull these existing programs that are already working well into there, and then we'll just patch up the ones that or populate the ones that aren't. So it's not all doom and gloom news, but we currently do have more infrastructure replacement needs than we have budget to maintain. And Madam Mayor, if council has any questions, I might ask Mr. McGifford to help respond to those.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report, and to Councillor Patola for requesting it. I do think this was a very helpful picture, and I think it is important to highlight that we were early adopters of asset management with our ERF fund due to the good work of staff and council many councils ago, and at the same time with our sewer and water review that was done, and the increases that have come to be able to fund that long term and sustainably. So there's good work going on, and there's more to be done. But I know that when I talk to mayors and councillors in other communities, the situations are very similar, except for several of them don't have any asset management, and certainly don't have an equipment replacement fund or others. So I do think it is important to recognize the good work that has been done, even though there's much more work to do. So thanks for the report. Questions from council? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to City Staff. Thank you, Mr. Ply, for the report. I like that we're talking about assets, because I'm still a firm believer that in any organization, including the City of Port Alberni, the biggest asset are employees. So I would love to hear from our employees on each and every one. Like, I mean, I look here and I can tell you how many times I've been in the arena this week, but I can't tell you the last time I was at Gyra Youth Center. So it'd be interesting to hear from our employees, the people who work there day in, day out, to get their idea of what is our priority and what isn't. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Haggard.
Under item number 2, it says council might direct that a facility needs assessment be completed to determine our city's needs. So did you want us to do that now, or do you want us to maybe put that on Andrew's radar to include it in the budget? Because I think that's going to be a very important tool for us.
Madam Mayor, so with that question, we do have money in the financial plan to do that facilities assessment. That's something that was populated in the Parks and Rec admin line item. It's just we haven't been able to undertake that this past year. So it was something that we do have money in the financial plan, and it's very important to just identify every single facility and the needs at each of those facilities moving forward. It's, going back to the deficit, I think we know there's a deficit, but there's that plan that needs to be undertaken to enable us to identify that, to bring the good information that council needs to make decisions on. So, we know we need to put money away. We just don't know exactly where we want to head and where council wants to direct us with all these assets.
Thank you. I'm wondering if, Andrew, it might be a better question for Tim, if we could speak a little bit more about where we're at with the potential of relocation of Public Works. I know that a few years ago, council opted to not at that time fund the study of what the options would look like. Has any work been done on that since, or is there, assuming that's not currently in this budget for this year?
I don't believe it's in the budget. Andrew, help me out.
No.
So the next step would be, so we've had a third party look at the site for its ability for our ability to mitigate risk of a 9 magnitude earthquake and a 20-meter tsunami, and it basically was a no and a no, or maybe and a no. So we might be able to firm up the building to survive the earthquake, but in about 20 minutes the tsunami would likely take it out. So the recommendation was that we would relocate this facility to higher ground. And the next step that we would like to take is to have adequate funding to investigate the 3 sites that were identified and sharpen up basically a concept plan that would help us be grant ready. And if we got to there where we knew what the costs were and we had done the background work, we could be eligible for a grant at some point. So that would be the next step now, is fund that next study.
Thank you. Would that be able to be flagged as a consideration for discussion at our next budget meeting as well? Item. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Dame.
Yeah, so as we proceed with our budget discussions and talking about infrastructure deficit and our facilities, I think a missing piece of information for myself is, in order to sort of make a decision about where our priorities are, there's a lot of facilities in town that I don't really have a very good gauge on how utilized they are and you know, like how valuable they are to the public. I hesitate to ask for more reports. Councillor Douglas is going to have a chat with me after the meeting, but this is one area where yeah, I don't know if it's a report that I'm asking for, but you know, there's like I say, there's facilities that are being used by different user groups, but I have no idea if it's 5 people and, you know, it's costing the city X amount of dollars every year. That would be useful information.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and it speaks to, you know, when we see a report like this, the instant kind of reaction is we need to increase our budget, we need to add more funding. The reality is we probably need to look at where we can make changes in order to free up funding. That's a difficult conversation to have because everybody wants us to properly fund our infrastructure, but nobody wants to see services taken away. However, there are sometimes strategic ways to look at if the city is best to provide every service or not. And over the last few years, we have done some of that and have made some changes, albeit not probably really significant changes. But I think that has to be a part of the conversation as we, and you know, a few kind of return to normal service levels, normal pre-COVID service level comments were made at our last budget meeting. And I think those are considerations we need to look at. Do we just return to business as usual prior to COVID, or are there changes to make in some of our services and how we offer those services? And when you get a report like this, because we are responsible for balancing all needs, and that does mean as well looking at the needs of a growing community, because we are a growing community, and we're a community with new people moving in, bringing different expectations of what we will offer, but the city doesn't need to be the organization to offer every service, and I think there's much more room for us to look critically at what makes sense for us and what doesn't. So thank you for that. And I don't know what that actually necessarily looks like on a large scale, but I know last council we identified a few specific opportunities and did make some changes, and it might be worth councillors having those conversations with staff as a starting point and bringing specific ideas, and then for council as a whole to explore together through reports following that. Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We might also want to look at actually getting rid of some of these assets, sell them to the different organizations, because they're going to be costing us more money than what they're worth. So even if you just got rid of them for $1 and say, this is your responsibility now, we don't want it anymore. Somehow work it out, because we don't want to be putting on a new roof and new heating systems on some of these very old buildings for that very reason. They're too costly. So is there any way we could maybe look at just getting rid of some of these old buildings? I don't know.
Thank you. And I did just want to note that probably the facilities master plan that Parks and Rec is working on will be a starting point to the facilities side. Obviously not the services side, but at least to that beginning piece. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just really quickly, actually, I think what Councillor Dame is requesting is maybe a tour of these facilities. That's something that I used to get when I was a councillor past. We would go through an organizational meeting, and then if we had any issues or whatever, we'd go down and look at City Works Yard, or start at Seaton's Park way on the other side of town and work our way back. So there's definitely some pieces of property that, you know, I go around, and when I'm not sleeping, I'll drive at nighttime and I'll take a look at these pieces of property and that. So I'm not saying that I would be part of it, but definitely I think a council tour of our properties, at least the general ones, would be advantageous. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure I understood the response to Councillor Haggard's question with regards to item number 2, the suggestion that council might direct that a facility needs assessment be completed to determine the city's needs for the next 5 to 20 years. I think the response was that we have money in the budget to do that, but I'm not sure anybody's answer the question about whether we should or shouldn't do that at this point with the money in the budget. It seems to me that that type of report would be the next step to follow this report that we've got to provide that information to council. And if I'm correct in that, then I would make a motion that we request such a report to be prepared. But I'll turn it back to the director to see whether or not that's actually the direction we're supposed to be going in.
Thank you, and I believe we funded that through surplus last year, the facilities master plan report, but maybe you can speak to where it's at again.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, that is correct. We did fund it through surplus from 2021, and we have started the process to get an RFP out to do that through a contractor or consultant.
So then there's no need to actually request it. It's in the works.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I think that the note in the report was a bit confusing, but Tim, unless you see it differently, there's no current need for council to give direction. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments on this? Okay, thank you again for the report. I think it's a very helpful outline of where we're at and some key priorities we need to look at.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Motion to receive the report, Madam Mayor? If I'm not mistaken, we have to receive that. Yeah, sorry, motion to receive the report.
We can, absolutely. We don't have to receive reports. And it's a bit, sometimes we write on our agenda to receive them, sometimes we don't, but it's harmless to do it. So accept your motion. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to bylaws. Item number 1, City of Port Alberni 2023 to 2027. Financial plan bylaw number 5075, 2023.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So last week we went through the financial plan at a high level, just an overview of the impacts on taxation. So within that, the details are now provided to council, and we're seeking first readings so that we can have the discussion and start the budgeting process over the next couple of months. In that financial plan, there was an 8% increase. We provided a lot of the driving factors behind that, considering that there is strategic priorities that we've been trying to achieve over the last few years and continued levels of service. And as mentioned by the mayor just recently, the COVID, return to pre-COVID levels of service for our parks and rec facilities. So in some of the strategic priorities that we had populated in the financial plan is including the SOMAS work that we continue to do, and as we try to reposition that property, there's funding in the financial plan for that. One of the good things that we did the last year and a half was the organic program. That fee for service now reflects the cost of providing that service and the replacement of those vehicles, those cans moving forward. So that's an example of a strategic priority that council wanted to undertake, and that is now populated in the financial plan as such. We continue to look at the tree program. That's populated in the financial plan. There's dollars, financial commitment in there for that. The opening of the public safety building, which was just the grand opening was this weekend, so that is in the financial plan, and a few other things, including the Connect the Keys pathway. With that, we do need to make sure that we do the financial plan process and have it completed by May 15th of every year. The timeline is also included in this report. We are at February 13th, and we're looking for first reading today. With that, I do want to walk through just some items beyond the operational side and the taxation side, and that's looking at our capital plan. So when we look at our capital plan with the new procurement policy, it's important that council understand that these projects that we're bringing forward in the financial plan, once they're approved and we have the budget authority to do these projects, it wouldn't come back to council for that approval of a contract. So that was one key difference with the new procurement policy. It helps streamline the processes, especially when we look at some of the projects that we undertake in the middle of summer when we do have limited options for council to meet, which pushes us outside of the timelines that we have in a lot of these procurements and makes it difficult for us to do that analysis and then award that contract. But as long as we have the financial ability to undertake these projects moving forward, council would not see them come back. Unless council chooses to pick a project out that they'd like to have come back. Council still has that ability. So if there's a project in the financial plan that council feels needs to come back to chambers and have that approval, we can still do that if council agrees. But as we go through the financial planning process, I'd ask that council looks at the capital planning component and identify any projects they feel needs to come back, understanding that we need to fully support that understanding of what is being undertaken for these capital projects moving forward. And just going to the capital infrastructure deficit, there's a lot of items that were pulled out as we were going through the process. The report that the CAO provided highlighted some of these items, but there's many items in there. It's not something that we want to bring in detail to council, but I think there might be a few items that we'd like to bring to council because they might have been discussed in council chambers as far as any improvements at Harbour Quay or certain specific items that council have any interest in. So we'd look at bringing back some items, including the youth services request for funding from the school district and ADAP. So those are some things that we'll bring back in the next staff report. With that, with the capital plan, as I mentioned, please have a review. The IRF is one area that we've seen some increases. Obviously, we've held out in replacing some of these items because there's still life in these assets. So managers will review the infrastructure, or not the infrastructure, but the equipment that we have. And if we can carry on with that equipment, we'd push it off. And a lot of these items were functioning quite well for the purposes that they had, but they might be 20 or 25 years old, well beyond the 7 to 13 year lifetime that most of our assets get IRF'd at. So the cost of these have gone up since COVID has occurred also. And with that, just noting that we did remove the taxation for the Connect the Keys in 2023 and deferred that into 2024. So that was $1.2 million that was pushed forward into 2024. With that, council can take any opportunities moving forward today, next week, and bring suggestions forward as far as items in the financial plan that we'd like to consider. As I said, next week at the committee of the whole meeting, that's when we can start having discussion and really dive into the capital plan to make sure that council is understanding what is being asked and we have that budget approval that time. So with that, I pass it back to council if there's any questions or anything that we'd like to explore today, and go from there.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Are there questions from council? Or would somebody like to move first reading first? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the City of Port Alberni 2023-2027 Financial Plan Bylaw number 5075-2023 be now introduced and read for a first time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Any comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none today. If there are any questions, even if they can't be answered today, they can be added to our Q&A document. Councillor Neely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just maybe for the public, so the next step is the 21st, is that correct? Tuesday the 21st will be the committee of the whole meeting, where the public can also come and have informal contact with council, as well as give their suggestions. Am I right, Mr. McIver?
That is correct, Madam Mayor. So 6 o'clock on the 21st of February is the time.
Thank you. Okay.
Come with your questions and come with your suggestions. That's what I always say. Thank you.
On the motion for first reading, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, proposed zoning bylaw amendment 3151 3rd Avenue, and this is just a final reading and adoption. Are there any questions on this for manager? Likely not. Okay. Councillor Patola, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that zoning map amendment number 54, 3151 3rd Avenue, Dog Mountain Brewing, bylaw number 5064, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5064.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Not seeing any comments on the motion. All in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And on to item number 3, proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 4925 Leslie Avenue, and this, I believe, is a final adoption as well. Councillor Douglas, would you like to read this one?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that zoning map amendment number 53 for 4925 Leslie Avenue, Needham. Bylaw number 5059 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, numbered 5059.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patola. And are there any questions or comments on this one? Okay, seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And correspondence for action, we have one item today. It is a letter dated February 3rd, 2023 from the Director of Wounded Warrior Run BC requesting access to city streets for the Wounded Warrior Run. This is something that comes before us every year. Councillor Mealy?
I'll make the motion, Madam Mayor. Council authorized Wounded Warrior Run BC access to city streets on Thursday, March 2nd, 2023 for the purpose of a Wounded Warrior Run from Highway 4, Johnston Road, to Gertrude Street, to Roger Street, to Victoria Quay, ending at the Port Alberni Legion branch number 293, subject to 1, the notification of emergency services in BC Transit, 2, consultation with all affected businesses and residents, 3, implementation of a traffic plan, and 4, provision of standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million minimum.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Douglas. And I will just note that they also invited a member of council to attend. I'm not able to attend that day, so if we could start the process of seeing who acting mayor is that month and make sure that we have someone represented there. And then, of course, I think any additional members of council who would like to attend would be welcome. Councillor Douglas, acting mayor. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, carried. And proclamations, we have one item from the Kinsman Club of Port Alberni, a letter dated January 23rd, 2023, requesting that the week of February 12th to February 19th, 2023 be proclaimed as Kinsman and Connect Week in Port Alberni. Would somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Mealy.
Madam Mayor, I move that the council proclaim February 12th to 19th, 2023 as Kinsman and Connect Week in Port Alberni and authorize flying the Kin Canada flag at City Hall in recognition.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, and I think we have that flag raising scheduled for tomorrow morning. On to correspondence for information. Oh, sorry. Councillor Patola.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Just a quick afterthought. The flag raising, if it's scheduled for tomorrow, I'm wondering if the flags at City Hall are still going to be at half-mast with regards to Mrs. Brett.
Thank you. Good question. Tim, are you able to comment on that?
The flags are currently at half-mast because of the passing of Donna Brett. I'm not aware of if there's a memorial date scheduled. Often the flags stay at half until the memorial date, and it's on my list to do today to find that out. And if there isn't one imminent, we'll bring the flags back up after today's acknowledgement.
Thank you. And what we have done in the past, where we have done flag raisings for other groups while we have had our flags at half-mast, is we have risen the flag up and then lowered it to half-mast. So we usually replace the city flag. So I think that would be the practice of what we would do again in this situation. But thank you for the question. On to correspondence for information. Danielle, are you able to summarize that?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Just a number of correspondence. We have heard from a couple of them today already in public input, but we have received a letter from Heritage BC regarding Heritage Week. The Alberni Clayoquot Continuing Care Society regarding election, special voting opportunities and requests for that to return. The Parks Master Plan concerns and requests to see some of that documentation be brought forward again. Concerns regarding the cold weather shelter at Eagles Hall. We've also received some update reports from the Forest Enhancement Society of British Columbia, and notice of the Port Alberni Canada Day Parade Committee. Due to lack of funding and interest, they're struggling. We've also, again, more correspondence around the Parks Master Plan and city parks in the Rogers Creek area. Concerns around zoning bylaws and fence heights. Correspondence from the Salvation Army and Michael Ramsey, which we heard from today on both those two items, and then minutes of the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission.
Thank you very much. Are there items councillors would like to speak to? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have two items, if I may. First of all, to the young couple sitting in the front, welcome to Port Alberni, and I'm very sorry you're going through these difficulties. We do have a manager of community policing that's very well versed in crime prevention through environmental design. Tim, I was wondering if we could maybe ask him to contact them and see if he can make an appointment, maybe do an audit of their premises to see if there's anything that they can do to help out with crime prevention.
We can do that, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. Does that work for you? We could try and help a little bit anyway. Great, thank you. And secondly, I'd like to apologize to Major Ramsey for my lack of action at the last meeting. I respect this office and I respect protocol, so I was very unsure of if I was able to intervene or if I should be intervening. But I assure you, I agree, lack of action is you're supporting it. So I assure you that if this ever happens again, I will be happy to intervene so that no person has to feel that way that you did while you're in council chambers. So I do apologize and thank you for coming forward.
Thank you. Other items? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just the letter, sorry if I'm looking at it again, it's from the Continuing Care Society on a special election voting privileges for our seniors in care. So I did have a conversation with Ms. Lonsky before she left about it, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact conversation now or the reasoning why, but definitely when it comes back to the people in all homes, West Haven and Rainbow Gardens and Echo Village, and that is, it was something we did as a city, was come to our seniors. Those are the people that have been in our community for years, and back when I was first on council, those were people that saw world wars and have been through a lot. So I know it's a small thing, and it seems like for some people it's small, but for the people that have never missed an election for 70, 80 years, for them to still have the ability to vote, I think is big. So I hope the next election we can change that.
Thank you for that. I do think it's important to note that there was an opportunity because we would go and do curbside voting at those locations still. However, I think that the process that we've used in the past where we had special voting days at those facilities meant that nobody had to request. It just was built in, it was automatic, and I think it was more effective. So I think that's a learning opportunity from this past election. And I would suggest we forward this letter. We will have an updated, or we will work to update our election bylaw later in this term. And I think we should attach this letter to that process. And I'd love to see it go back to the way that it was. I think it worked very well that way, and it didn't necessarily make sense for that change to be made. Though the opportunity was still there, it probably wasn't as effective. So thanks for that. Other comments? Councillor Dame.
Yeah, I would like to echo Councillor Hager's comments as well. I would like to apologize to Major Ramsey. We did a poor job of representing ourselves as a council at that meeting. There was not a great diversity of perspectives offered, and I do apologize. Then we will work on being more welcoming and more supportive, especially of valuable community members such as yourself who have selflessly contributed so much. So again, I apologize. The other thing that I would like to raise is I would like to talk about the fence issue here that was raised by Ms. Wynn here. Is it Wynn or Wine? Wynn? Okay. I think it's a valid concern when we see a bylaw being enforced in one incident and is broadly not being enforced in others. And I'm not entirely sure what exactly can be done in this particular situation. If there's like, I don't know if you can request a variance on fence height, something like that, but there must be something that we could do. Okay. Okay, so you've taken some steps. That's good. Yeah, but I just would like to speak out in support of you. Certainly, it should be your right to defend your property and feel safe in your home. So, yeah, I think that it was good action that Councillor Hager suggested, and hopefully we can, continue to support you and work with you to find some solutions. So, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, thanks for that. And I was going to speak to this as well because the fence and hedge height bylaw is something that has come before council in the last few years. We did start a process to amend it following a specific variance that council actually approved for an increased fence height. And I think in this circumstance, we probably shouldn't have. However, we did approve a variance. So there is a process. You're aware of it. You're in it. I think that there is a greater kind of review that could be done, maybe even council kind of getting up to date on the process that was started before it was withdrawn a few years ago, because there's some good background there outside of your specific situation, which of course will be explored through the variance that you've submitted. I also think that it is important to note, and I think this is from memory kind of why we ended up withdrawing from the process at the end of the day, is that a higher fence is not necessarily the best way to keep your property safe. And so I do thank Councillor Haggard for the suggestion of our manager of public safety having that appointment, because he is well trained in best practices, and in some circumstances a fence probably is what you need. So I don't know your specific situation and can't speak to it today, and obviously we'll have an opportunity for that, but did just want to share that there is some background that we have given a variance in the past to a property on 10th Avenue. And we did subsequently start a review of that bylaw, and we had some proposed changes to it. So I think there's at least a process there that we could kind of go back to for information and explore if council wants to look at updated changes to that bylaw or not. Okay, not seeing any other items or comments people would like to speak to today, and no reports from in camera, so we'll move on to council reports. Are there any items councillors would like to highlight from their reports today? Okay, seeing none, thank you for the reports. We'll move on to new business, and item number 1, procedures bylaw amendment, notice of motion provided January 23rd, 2023. I believe this was Councillor Patola's notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would move that council direct staff to amend council procedures bylaw 2013, bylaw number 4830, section 14, sub 2, by removing the word Wednesday and replacing it with the phrase Friday, 9 days prior. And further, by amending section 14, sub 3, by removing the word Thursday and replacing it with Monday.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I'll let you speak to it first, and then we'll have additional comments from there. And I do note that it says notice of motion, but this is an actual motion now that it does sit on our agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of that is simply to shift, a one-time shift in the preparation of documents for meetings for council by approximately a week, so that council will have one full week to review documents, prepare them, read them. I'm sure most of the citizens that attend these meetings or watch them on YouTube or wherever we broadcast are aware of how much information there is that needs to be processed by council. I'm not sure that everybody else does, and sometimes it tops 300 or 400 pages. So it's a significant amount of work, and not only is it a matter of processing and reading it, but it's a matter of putting into context that it's usable so that the decisions that council make are properly informed and well thought through. So I realize that this may create a burden on city staff, which wasn't the intention, that's secondary, but that would be a burden of only once, because once the entire process shifts, it's shifted and we're into a cycle that just starts at a different time. It's still a 2-week cycle or 2-month cycle or whatever cycle we're in now. It just starts a little earlier and ends a little earlier. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I hesitate to support this motion as it's currently written without first getting input from staff on whether or not it will functionally work. So Danielle, I'm not sure if you'd be prepared to provide input today, or if not, then I would support getting even a brief staff report on what implications would look like, rather than, and that would be just changing the wording of the motion, amending it to not that council direct staff to amend, but that council prepare a report on the implications of directing council to amend. So Danielle, if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I think a report would be best. It provides kind of an opportunity for two things. One, we can provide you a little bit of background on some of the process implications, but it also will allow council additional consideration when it comes to the other procedural bylaw amendments that we plan to bring forward. So it'll help us align it with future discussions as well, and kind of everybody come to an informed opinion on whether it would work that way or not.
Thank you. And if we were to successfully amend the motion and pass it to have a report, what would the rough timeline be for us to expect that report?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I would say within, if not next council, the one after that.
Thank you. I'll let other members of council speak first, just to see where everyone is at. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I'm a bit out of practice of this, but could we simply table the motion and then take it off the table once we have the information from staff at the next council meeting?
I think process-wise, we'd be better to amend the motion that's been made so that we are giving that direction to staff to prepare a report. If that's okay. I'll just go ahead and make an amendment. So I will move that we amend the motion to read that council direct staff to prepare a report outlining the implications of and so on in the motion as written. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dame. And if anyone wants to speak to the amendment of just getting a brief staff report, I'll go to Councillor Patola and then Councillor Mealy.
I would say unnecessary if that's an acceptable amendment to myself. So I would think that any further speaking on it is unnecessary.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's what I was going to say. If it was okay with the original motion, just a friendly amendment would have been fine.
Wonderful.
So,
I don't think it's a friendly amendment just because it is really, it's sure friendly, but it is directed a significant change. So we will vote on that amendment, but not seeing any other comments. I'll call the question on the amendment, not on the motion itself. All in favor? Carried, none opposed. So now we would be voting and having conversation on the amended motion, which is just to prepare a report. Are there any comments on this? Okay, seeing none, then on the amended motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And thanks for bringing that forward, Councillor Patola. And on to item number 2, city streetlights. We have a report dated January 20th, 2023 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, providing information regarding the city streetlights. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll start off a little again. This report is in response to a council request 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting for a report on the city streetlights, and particularly on the actual repair and maintenance of them and how someone would report those. Within the city, there are 1,819 streetlights. 1,055 of those are actually lease lights that are on hydro poles that we lease from hydro. Those are identified typically because the utility pole is made of wood. The remaining 764 lights that we own and operate and maintain are typically identified because they'll be on steel poles. Between all of those, we distinguish those by the different type of pole, but we rely on city staff, emergency personnel, as well as the residents themselves to identify if there is actually a repair required or if there's an outage. So with that in mind, the important part of this entire report is that regardless of the streetlight ownership, whether it is a hydro light or a city light, the residents don't have to worry about that. What they need to know is, please call us. Please call city staff at 250-720-2840 during the day and 250-724-1351 at night. Also, we do have this lovely Report a Problem webpage that we welcome everyone to do that way if they prefer, because they can do that with their phone as well. The city lights that we own are usually repaired within 1 to 3 business days, and the hydro poles are repaired as they are able to. We don't have a timeline for that. The second part of the report deals with illumination levels along the streets. During the replacement of the city lights, we replaced them from high-pressure sodium HPS lights to LEDs in 2016. And the reason for that are manyfold. One, LEDs can last twice as long, as well as they use typically 50% as much power. Then in 2021, Hydro also, through an initiative through a national program and grant monies, they replaced all of their lights with LEDs. And at both of those occasions, we talked about illumination levels. And in specific instances where we could, we improved illumination levels. But what was recognized is it was far more cost effective to look at the entire city at once and prioritize the areas that we have illumination issues on a basis of safety. For streetlights typically are just installed for safety, whether that is perceived with, as Councillor Haggard had said earlier, with crime prevention through environmental design, where it helps people feel safer, or through actually improvement of lighting in an intersection to avoid those conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians. So we do prioritize these on a safety basis. I keep reiterating that because right now we probably could install almost 50% more lights and we still wouldn't meet some illumination levels, which are determined by a standard national standard. And so we try to meet that, but the intention is as we can and as we identify. If it's a cul-de-sac, for instance, with 8 homes and there's only 2 lights, but everybody's comfortable with their neighbors, we wouldn't go in and put in 3 more lights at a request. We would look at higher density intersections or higher density land use where we either have commercial or residential at an intersection that's an arterial road with a lot of traffic and a lot of pedestrians, and that's how we would prioritize that. I think what we're asking for in this council report is that through the consideration of the 5-year capital plan, is that in 2023 we have $80,000 funded for an illumination study for the entire city, and that would help us then budget for the further 5-year capital plans with light improvements throughout the city. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Mealy.
May I make the motion, Madam Mayor, and then have discussion?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council receive the staff report dated January 20th, 2023 regarding city street lights, including the process for reporting repairs and outages, and further, the council directs staff to include funding for a streetlight illumination study for consideration within the 5-year financial plan for 2023 to assist in prioritizing illumination changes and to guide future capital projects.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Douglas.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Dickinson. Thank you for your report. Really appreciate that. I think just the main thing is to note if there is a problem, within the city that the citizens can call. Like I said before at the previous meeting, we got some really great people down at City Works Yard that will field those calls even after hours. Also, too, if you're online, like you said, on your phone now, you can just go to the search bar, report a problem on the City of Port Alberni website, and it takes you right to it. I just did it right now. So, easier access. Back in the day, like if it was my dad, you'd go down to the City Works Yard, like I said, and say hi, knock on the door. It's a little cold in there now, but it's that's just the boiler. It's okay. But it is nice to have the phone numbers, and it's online as well. So if there's any problems within the City of Port Alberni, please, to all our citizens, please utilize what's there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Dickinson, I just one question to follow up kind of on the explanation that Councillor Milley's given us. Would those numbers also apply to traffic lights as well as street lights?
Definitely. If there's a concern with a flashing red traffic signal at an odd time of day, then please call us and we'll have our electrician look into it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, so just for clarity, the motion is to bring this forward for consideration in our budget this year. I think that is timely and certainly a worthwhile initiative, so thanks for bringing it forward. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 3, from the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation, we have resolution of shareholders, something that we pass each year. Danielle, do you want to give an overview of this process?
Yeah, just very briefly. As part of the Community Forest Corporation, as Mayor Minion suggested, we annually, as shareholders, need to approve the attached resolutions. We've also attached the financials from 2021 for council's consideration. Also, it is a little odd because it's a year behind, it seems, but that is normal. So yeah, any questions?
Thank you very much. Would somebody like to move the motion? Councillor Dame.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll move that Council endorse the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation resolutions of shareholder in writing for 2022 as presented.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patola. And any comments on this? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And moving on to item number 4, added to our agenda from Councillor Haggard, a letter of support for APD.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As we all know, APD has been on a short-term closure, and they have recently announced that the business as is not viable, and they have formed a working group to try and come up with solutions. APD currently has 90 employees, and at the recent truck loggers conference that I attended, a speaker said the multiplier effect of indirect jobs was 3 times. So I'm concerned about the loss of jobs, but also the implications of Catalyst with a long-term and permanent closure of APD, which could affect other jobs in our community. I would also like to include support for the working group to research innovation and creativity for the long-term success of APD. While our council is working very hard to diversify our economy, forestry is still a very important economic driver in our community. So I'd like to support this, writing a letter to Western Forest Products for the continued operations of APD.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Any comments on this additionally? Okay, seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And I'll go to Councillor Douglas now for his notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got 2 notices of motion, and I've got these copied out so I can provide them to staff later. So the first motion is that staff be directed to implement virtual attendance technology, for example, Zoom, for City Council and other relevant meetings. This procedure would consider the correct minimum attendance guidelines that we already have in place. The second notice of motion is more towards question period, and that is that staff be directed to develop a procedure which would permit online audiences to submit live questions to City Council, and this would incorporate current City Council question procedures, such as it needs to be related to the meeting at hand, that sort of thing. So those are the 2 notices, and I'll provide them to our staff afterwards.
Thank you very much. So those are notices of motion, so those will be voted on at our next meeting. Thank you for that, Councillor Douglas. And just one point of clarification, question period actually does not have to be related to the current meeting. It's a very broad kind of allowance for question period. Public input period specifically has to be comments on topics of relevance to City Council, but question period is just an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions.
Thank you.
Whether they're related or not. So
Yeah.
just
I
one
think-
point of interest there.
I think maybe what I was referring to was in order to answer the questions, if they're not related to the current meeting, quite often we have to we're not able to answer them at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to question period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was actually a 6th item under new business that your worship added for me during my spiel, as it were. I had requested that the staff provide the legal opinion that they obtained with regards to the Eagle Hall, and that they provide the good neighbor agreement with regarding the Bread of Life shelter to council. I don't know if that needs to be as a motion or
Thank
a
you.
request,
I think
but
given that it is a topic that's already been discussed, everyone has the background, I think it would be appropriate for it just to be a motion rather than a notice of motion, if council is comfortable with that, if someone would like to second it.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, moved and seconded. Do you need to speak any further to the information you're looking for? Okay, I think it's self-explanatory. Then on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and we'll move on to question period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of City Council. Would anyone like to ask a question today? Ellen Frood first, and then we'll go to Neil.
Hiya. Thanks for all the great work you're doing. So my one question relates to the lighting. And there are some crosswalks in this city that are particularly dangerous from my perspective. And I'm just wondering if these are included for flashing lights, push a button, whatever you call them. I think that's really important to be included. We've had deaths in crosswalks. And I don't think we can afford that to happen again. And another is, again, I understand Committee of the Whole will be talking about the budget, but I just want to comment and maybe ask Council to consider the comment that Councillor Haggard made about some of the facilities, looking at transferring them over. As a nonprofit organization, there are spaces that I might be able to take advantage of from a programming perspective, and the one that comes to mind when I went through the budget, because I read it, believe it or not, and I didn't fall asleep, is Gyro Center, which you mentioned, and I noted that the revenue coming from that is $6,000, and the associated expense is almost $60,000. So that makes me concerned, and it makes me wonder how many other facilities you might be able. So again, it's a question for consideration, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Rob, I'll just get you to answer that question if you're able. And I think also additional to just if it's included in the scope of work, when there are crosswalks that people in the community feel are unsafe, what is the best way for them to bring that forward? Because often we do get people coming with specific comments here. I don't know if traffic advisory or sending them along directly to staff is the best approach. Thanks.
I'll answer that question first. If you send an email to engineering@portalberni.ca, then we will look at it, and if it warrants going to the Traffic Advisory Committee, we'll take it there. The beauty of the Traffic Advisory Committee is we have ICBC representatives, so they can talk about the incidents that may have occurred there. We have Ministry of Transportation if it's along their corridor, as well as other representatives such as community policing, RCMP, so we can talk about different solutions. So it's a great opportunity. And I'd say if people want to phone instead of email, then they can phone our regular number, which I don't know off the top of my head, which I think is 550-7280, but don't quote me on that. You might get somebody else who will say hi to you. I was going to say, related to the question on intersections, a couple of years ago we did a network screening study which identified our 15 intersections that are of most concern to us. And part of the study had identified with ICBC and RCMP that speeding is usually a contributing factor, and lighting. And so each one of those intersections, we're looking at trying to do 1 or 2 a year for the next, we've got construction, we just tendered documents for 2 intersections on Friday. And we're hoping to do 1 or 2 a year until those 15 are done, and then we would go beyond that. And those would be prioritized through the Traffic Advisory Committee from people calling in and making concerns, as well as after the 15, we then have identified another 30 that we can start working on as well. The lighting study that we would do, they basically work together with that network screening study to help identify those priorities.
Okay, thank you. Are those crosswalks 10th and Redford and 10th and Dunbar?
Yes, those 2.
Thank you. Okay. Neil Anderson, if you want to come forward.
Thank you. I'm not sure how to approach this. I can make a comment first. I've commended a couple of the new council members in the last world. I was impressed by the fact that in the last, was it 5 meetings now? 4 meetings, 5, that for the first time in a lot of years, before your era too, the minions, I've never heard so much discussion and debate within the council members, and I had said that I was impressed, and that's something that I was looking for in new council members. I hope that continues and you keep your independence. I would like to first address, that's nice. I'd like to just address a question to Councillor Dane, and don't take this the wrong way, but I was a little confused about the apology you made to the Salvation Army, who, by the way, I believe you do wonderful work, so I'm not. And my question through the mayor was, I'm looking at the discussion that took place the other meeting regarding the Eagles, and the apology, I wasn't sure whether you were saying you simply apologized for not having more to say about that issue, or were you, or if you were in agreement with some of the comments were made regarding Councillor Petola. The comments like intimidation, safe place, bullying, and offensive nature. I'm not sure if you were heading that direction as well.
Thank you,
Sure.
Councillor Dame, if you want to respond.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. my apology to Major Ramsey was because in review of how I felt the events that of that meeting, how it went, I felt that his discomfort was visible, and there was no one else in council spoke up during that time to express any sort of. Oh, I apologize. Okay. Well, okay. So I speaking for myself.
Let's just try to
did
not interrupt each other right now.
I didn't speak up, I'll say, in response to his obvious discomfort, and offer my thoughts on the situation. I was very much trying to listen, and there are times when I think that it's easy to assume that others have more information or experience, and you should just sit back and listen. But I think that I'm learning that it's important to speak up and let your voice be heard, especially when you're in this position. So hopefully that clarifies.
Thank you, Councillor Dean.
That's right. And let me ask Mayor Minions a couple of questions, which is closer to my feelings over the last 3 years and another 15 days. And I'll mention it as a hotel because I'm getting tired of calling it the Kingsway. And what I went through it'll be 4 years and still haven't got questions. So I sat at the meeting when the issue over the Eagles, and I was a member of the Eagles, so I know the building very well, not that that has any, and intimidation, I didn't look at that as any intimidation. I didn't see it was a safe place. I didn't think that jeopardized anyone's comfort. It's uncomfortable when you have people disagreeing with you. I'm certainly used to that. And bullying, I did not see any bullying. And I'm saying this in defense of the councillor because I don't think it was totally fair comments. And offensive, the speaker was offended by the comments that were made, but I can be pretty sure that the councillor was offended by some of the comments that were made against him. You can't say anything these days without offending someone, so that's part of the debate and discussion. And so I want to ask Mayor, and the number of times I got up talking about this one issue, which isn't over yet because I still answers that haven't been given. Do you think that I was standing here time and time again, not every meeting, but pretty close, till I was getting tired of hearing myself, but I wasn't going to quit. Do you think I wasn't intimidated by the lack of response and the responses I got, and the lack of input from council members who sat for 2 years and didn't say a word, didn't even hold me accountable? I wanted to be held accountable. I never got that opportunity. Do you think I felt intimidated?
You're asking me
Yes,
if I
I'm
thought
asking
you felt intimidated?
Yeah, you're part of the...
Sure. I think it is an intimidating process for anyone to speak at council. So, yes,
Did you think
possibly at times.
that I didn't feel I was comfortable in a safe place bringing it up and up again? You think that it was stressful to me?
You know what, Neil, we have discussed this issue.
We're
I
discussing
understand,
it.
yeah.
We're discussing it right now. We've talked on a few things together.
We have, and we've also sat down together and talked about how things could have been done differently. We've spent a 3-hour meeting together. We've sat down after council meetings. We've done multiple reports. So, Neil, I understand. Just a moment, please. I understand.
No, I'm the speaker right now.
You need to let me speak as well because I'm responding to your question.
No, you're getting off the question.
No, Neil, I am trying to respond to your question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I know that it's intimidating to stand here and speak, and I know that it's incredibly frustrating when you feel you can't get an answer to the questions that you're asking. I feel that I have recognized that with you many, many times, and I don't know, to be really honest, how to put an end to the feeling that you have around this issue with the Kingsway Hotel. I often feel left answering questions on something that I don't have more information on, and I'm not sure how to address that. So I would be really happy to sit down with you again after council and talk in more detail. I understand that it is intimidating to speak in this way.
Okay, that's
And
the
I
only-
would just
Thank
ask
you.
that you understand that it is also difficult for members of council to try to answer questions where we don't necessarily have the information.
Or ask questions. And you think that I was offended by some of the responses I got?
Yes,
Just
I
fix
can
the
see
yes
you were
or no.
offended, absolutely.
Yes. And I think you were offended by the fact that I kept bringing this thing back up over and over again.
Nope, I was not offended by that. I understand that
Well,
why
some
you wanted
people
to bring
were,
it up
because
over and over.
offensive is... Anyway, the perception that one person has over another differs, and I don't believe in support of Councillor Patola. I don't think that those intimidation, etc., that was justified. He was persistent, I will give him that. And I wondered why he was, but it was his feelings, and he expressed it that way, and that's what I'm looking for in a council member. I'm bringing this up too. It falls into my second question, the code of conduct that I talked about, and that actually there was a very large discussion here at the last meeting. And then I referred to there was no minutes of the last meeting posted, and there usually there has been for 2 years, but there was a summary, and the summary, if I've got this right, Mayor Minions, is you highlight what you consider the more important issues that have been brought up at a council meeting. I thought that was an extremely important discussion, and I mentioned at that time that it's a chance for this city council and the other city councils around the province to come down with a set of rules that could avoid a lot of the incidents that occur from time to time. And you alluded to that yourself. And it shouldn't just apply to council staff and speakers standing here. I was hoping so many times, hold me accountable for what I say, but there was silence for 2 years. Anyway, so my question. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any intention of the city when you consider this code of conduct, and I think it should be an in-depth one, to everyone's benefit, to include public input? The reason I'm saying that, at the last meeting, I opened myself and said, if anyone wishes to get one side of my side of the story as to why I think it's so necessary to do a good job of this, please contact me and just have a discussion. And I had one person that actually talked to me, and the other 5 never has. But I'm asking you, is there any plans to include public opinion before you draft this out, and instead of come to a meeting saying we've had a draft now, this is what we're going to vote on? Such an important document in my case, especially with my experiences, without dwelling into all that. It is a question.
Thank you. So at this point, that has not been part of the consideration, and ACRD did just hold a session writing their code of conduct where we had a facilitated workshop as well, and that's not the process that they've used. However, I think that's a great suggestion to either, I don't know what the right mechanism is, to put it out for input or to bring it to an additional council meeting. A committee of the whole could be used as well, so there's more opportunity for comment from the public prior to it being adopted. So if council wanted to go that direction, I think that would be an easy step for us to take.
Could I have the opinions of the other council members? I think a committee of the whole probably would be, where that is the item on the agenda, because it would be quite, I think there'd be a lot of discussion on it. And I would hope it would be positive discussion. I probably would promise I wouldn't bring up the police down the road.
Do you? Thank you, Councillor Mealy.
Oh, I'll tackle that, Madam Mayor. So first of all, thank you, Mr. Anderson, for coming again, and it was a nice talk that we had last time. I would caution having council put rules, extra rules on what the public can say or how they approach council, and the reason why. Of course, everything has to be respectful. I mean, I could go back to all the times that council that people came to me and called me different names and that, but within the council chambers, it's kind of expected to be somewhat dignified conversation and with respect. However, I don't feel that council needs to put rules on the speakers because, as we've heard today, it is already tough to come to council and talk. So if we're putting extra rules on those people to be in a certain line and in a certain way, then that may prevent probably some of our most quiet taxpayers to come forward and have their say. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying I would hate to see additional restrictions on speakers over top of what we have just for those. And I mean, we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms as well, and what you can say with public speech. So
I wasn't.
So I appreciate the comment,
Yeah.
and I do want everything in here to be respectful.
And I understand what you're saying, and I sort of agree. But there is times when someone standing it here can get a little out of hand. I'm sure. But normally that's tied into this whole process. Normally when that happens, it's out of frustration because they're not getting what they're asking for from the council or staff. So that is another reason why it's so important to have the rules defining what is appropriate conduct. And it should include some of the speakers. And anyway, I'd just like to know the feelings briefly, if you don't mind.
Any member of council is welcome to put their hand up at any time if they'd like to comment. Councillor Dame.
Just to clarify, through you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Anderson, you're referring to how we feel about the public having input in what our code of conduct is?
I'm just suggesting that it would be I think it would be a great idea if this council included some input from the public.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I'm just wanting your general feelings as to how you think this should go. I've explored the city of Nanaimo quite in depth, and they seem to be focused on the meetings that are not open to the public and all that. And that's an aspect that's addressed, but it's not the main one. It's just the general interaction between, and it mentions this in the draft code, between the city council, staff, and the public. It mentions all three, and it's dealing with transparency, openness, honesty, and everything else. And that covers every three of those groups.
Councillor Dame.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I would support figuring out some way to take public input on that, as the mayor suggested. I think bringing that to a committee of the whole would be a great way to do so.
You'd support a committee in the whole on that issue itself.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Anderson, for your comments. I do want to stress that the campaigning period has come and gone. And so we are now a council together that, as I stated earlier, speaks with one voice. I don't want this incident to overshadow the issues that we were talking about. There are two separate issues here, and they both garner their own importance. But one should not focus on one issue to the detriment of the other. Housing is a serious matter. Safety in our community is a serious matter, as is safety in this chambers. So, truly, some people are nervous when they come to speak in public. They're nervous, in my experience, because they are committed to their cause and they want to do honor to their cause. They want to do a good job, and that's what makes people nervous. That is something that should be upheld and honored. But some people are free to speak. We're not all a Mr. Jessup, who apparently had no problem taking the podium today. But we don't want to simply rely on rules and then have those rules distract us from the real issues. So in one way, I would say that there is room for public input into what the code of conduct is. But I don't think that we should look at the code of conduct as being an overriding issue that detracts from making sure we have enough money to solve our combined sewer overflow problem. And it would be just as easy if we threw it wide open to the public or to anyone to end up with rules for conduct that resemble the Marquis of Queensberry, which would not be of use to anyone. So, yes, Mr. Anderson, I do think that there is room for public input. I do think the facilitated process that we are undertaking at the moment is probably going to be the most beneficial because it has that facilitation and guidance in it so we don't get wildly off track. And I'm hoping that once we come up with a final code of conduct, as I requested last meeting, that that code of conduct is useful to make the business of the city move faster and not get distracted by pointing fingers or by emotional responses. Thank you.
That's a good political statement you made right there, yeah. My question would be that I'm not sure where you stand on that now. You say, yeah, it's a good thing, but how, a code of conduct, and Councillor Milley dwelled on this very briefly. He says, why do we need, you did say something to the effect, why do we need it? What's the problem with doing what should naturally, what we would naturally want to do? Be honest with each other, be open with each other, be consistent with the messages that you give over a period of time. I'm talking about any one issue. Transparency. This is lacking, and I would imagine that that's why provincially it started off saying, look, there should be codes of conduct. The worst thing about it, you don't have to have one. They gave you 15 pages, and at the end it says it's up to each council to determine whether or not you want to even have one. We don't here, and it's resulted in problems. I'm not saying it has to encompass all the issues, and it shouldn't take necessarily priority. They say 6 months after the election, but if they say you don't have a code of conduct, so what? So it takes 7, 8, 9 months, so what? But I think it deserves the attention of each and every member of a council to do a good job and not just say, let's put this down, that'll do it until the next election. I'm trying to solve some of the problems that I have and other people, not just myself. This is why I talk about the public. It's not just myself that would come to that meeting. You should watch what I say, I may be the only one. But there's many people feel the same way, they just don't come to the meetings. I don't know, I'd still like to hear from the other two very briefly. I have a reason for asking this question, so, John.
So, Mr. Anderson, I'll just jump in.
Yes.
Yes, we should have a code of conduct. Yes, the public should be involved in the drafting of it. No, the public shouldn't have ultimate control because it should be a document that's created for a purpose. So we should all work together to make sure we're achieving that purpose, and I think you described that purpose
I agree
very
with
well.
you. Thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe that everybody in this room should be treated with respect, whether it's council to council or council to members of the public, and that's why I felt the need to apologize to Major Ramsby, because he was not treated with the respect that he should have been treated with. I just went through a code of conduct process with the Alberni-Clearcart Regional District. It was an 8-hour, very in-depth, comprehensive document, pages and pages long, but it was created by the board, for the board, and I can assure you that this council will undertake the very same in-depth process, and it will come back before council in a public forum for approval. So I feel at that time, that would be when the public can come and comment on it.
Thank you. And you
Thank
said
you, Mr. Anderson. I'm going to go to Councillor Douglas for his comment next. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Neil,
That's
Mr. Anderson, I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can make
Do you
one,
have a final question?
no, to Councillor Haggard, because this still remains in the back of my mind. Again, for 2 years, I was hoping every time I got and talked about this one issue that I would be challenged. I'd be held accountable. I was never able to get that because all 6 members of the council never made a comment. In over 2 years, they sat silent. I brought this up at meetings. And I was trying to be held accountable because that would have given me an opportunity to explain more about where I was coming from. They never even picked up the phone. That's another example, a small one, not the big one, of why we need a code of conduct. And thank you for allowing me the time to express my feelings, because it is important to me that we do a good job of this, we being the 3 parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions from members of the public? Lisa.
Sorry, Lisa from Northport. Just a quick question. I thought today was supposed to be about the OCP, or some part of it.
No, today is a regular meeting of council, and OCP was not on the agenda specifically for today. But if you have questions about OCP, we're happy to take them. We might not be able to answer them today, but you're welcome to ask.
Okay. No, I thought I seen on the Let's Connect that that's what was supposed to be on for today's agenda. So my apologies. So yeah, okay, no, I'll double check, whatever. Could you possibly tell me when the dates are for those? Just,
Scott, do you know the next date?
We don't have prescribed dates. We're just starting the policy development and the public engagement. So there'll be a series of them. Please, and I apologize if the Let's Connect was incorrect and pointed you to today, but that is a good site, and then there's an OCP section. So there's going to be a wide variety of opportunities. We haven't set those prescribed dates for any component of it yet.
oh, because there's a thing that goes all across and it says dates, so that's why I'm like, okay, better go there today, and then all of a sudden it's not even
There was kind of a roadmap about how we're going to go through for the next 6 months, but not exact dates of them yet. So there's various stages of it,
Okay.
but not exact dates yet.
Okay, so how will we know? Just on the Let's Connect? Or will it be on City Council's?
So some will be at
It's very
council.
confusing going back and forth, honestly, because it goes from one, and you're trying to find someone, and then you're supposed to go into there, and then you got to sign into something else, and it's very confusing.
And there'll be a variety of methods. Some will be at committee of the whole and council meetings. Other will be out in the community, trying to engage with community groups. There'll be pop-up sessions, so there's going to be a variety of different methods that we try and engage with the community on the OCP moving forward.
Okay, is there any way to put it on both so that it's not hard for people to find when those things are going to happen? Because I feel it's really important that the community is out involved in that.
Most certainly, and when there are prescribed events and things happening, those dates will be part of that communication. But we haven't got exact dates on exact things currently.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you. I saw a hand up in this area as well for a question. Was there a question from a member of the public? Okay. Okay, seeing none, then would somebody like to move adjournment?
Motion to adjourn, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Douglas. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.